Owning a dog with reactivity can be incredibly challenging. I'm going to go through 10 reasons that might be causing your dog to be reactive. Before we start going through these reasons, I just want to make it very clear that this is not a DIY video on how to sort out reactivity in your dog. Reactivity can be a potentially dangerous behavior problem, so it's something that we would highly advise that you seek the services of a professional for to help you sort this out with your dog. We will include a link in the description of this video to certified trainers. This database is all over the world, so hopefully you can find someone where you are that can help you with this issue. Having said that, we think it is, however, very useful to be able to understand the reasons that could be causing your dog to be reactive. If you can understand the reasons, it puts you in a better situation to sort the problem out. There's a bunch of causes of reactivity in dogs. We're going to go through 10 of them today. Stick around, you might be surprised at what some of these motivations for reactive behavior are. Genetics. Some breeds are just predisposed to be reactive. It's not surprising when you consider what these breeds were developed for. They were developed to be on a little bit of a hair trigger and to be alert to everything around them. It's more common in breeds like your Malinois, some of your terriers, some of your working breeds, for example, your Dobermans, your German Shepherds. These breeds were designed to be very responsive to aspects of their environment, so it's not surprising that these breeds can be predisposed to reactive behavior. So we can have the genetics of breed, but then we can also have the genetics of temperament. You can have, in some situations where parents are reactive dogs, and lo and behold, they produce puppies that can also be quite reactive. So this is, again, something to consider when you're trying to source a puppy. Make sure that you exclude any dogs that are going to be excessively reactive, because it really is a difficult problem to live with and try and manage and resolve. Number 2 is lack of socialization. Obviously, if the pup has not been exposed to a wide array of people, dogs, situations, sensory stimulation during its socialization period, it's going to view those things with suspicion when it's older. So make sure that the pup has a really rich socialization chapter in their lives. You never want to force them into situations, but you want to expose them to as much as possible in a nice, relaxed manner. The environment should be enticing to the pup. It should draw the puppy towards it. As soon as you try push the puppy to meet men with hats and beards, etc., you can actually cause a problem. So there is such a thing as over socialization, but if you go at the puppy's pace, you're generally going to be 100% fine. The third potential motivator for reactivity is learned behavior. And this I'm actually going to split into 3 subcategories. And there we have trauma, defense strategy, and habitual behavior. So obviously trauma, it pretty much speaks for themselves. If a dog is out on a walk and it gets attacked by another dog while it's on lead, it can obviously become reactive just from that one experience, and it's understandable. What can then often happen is the dog then develops a defensive strategy. It knows that this is a potentially dangerous situation when it's out and it sees other dogs around, so it starts becoming reactive to make those other dogs go away. It's on a lead, it can't escape, so its only option is to try and create distance between itself and the other dog that it thinks is going to harm it. So this becomes a learned defensive strategy. The third aspect of the learned behavior as a motivator for reactive behavior is habitual behavior. And I see this a lot on dogs that get walked in areas where there are other dogs behind gates or fences. The other dogs rush up. They're doing a territorial defense, if you will, of their property. And after a few repetitions of this, the dog going on the walk thinks that all other dogs are psychopaths, and it can actually develop a reactive response in that dog going for a walk, even though there's no other contributing factor there. It's something that you need to be very mindful of if you take your dog for walks in neighborhoods. Either manage it, micromanage it to ensure that there's no issue in your dog and that they don't end up with a habitual reactive response to the presence of other dogs. Number 4, fear and anxiety. Even if a dog has never had a traumatic experience with another dog or a person or whatever the case may be, the dog might just be an inherently more nervous or less confident type of dog, and it's thinking something bad might happen. Something bad may never have happened before, but it's thinking it might. So again, its only option is to try and make that thing go away, because obviously if that thing goes away, then the bad thing can't happen, right? So a generalized fear or anxiety can cause reactive behavior in dogs. Number 5 is an interesting one, and it starts off not being too much of a problem, and then it quickly becomes a go-to strategy. And the problem here is overstimulation. If a dog's in an environment where its head's about to explode, there's so much excitement going on, but they are prevented from releasing that excitement, so to speak. Say, for example, the dog is used to always playing with other dogs, and then you take the dog, say, to the vet, where obviously we're in a vet's waiting room now. We can't be playing with other dogs. They're on their lead. They're expecting to be able to play with other dogs. Their expectation is not meeting reality, so they become incredibly frustrated. And what happens then is this often flips over into aggression. We get this frustration-aggression model. That can actually then become a reactivity in that dog, because it starts associating this frustration and aggression with other dogs or other people, and not being able to play or do whatever it was that they were hoping to do. So that overstimulation is I would say, is probably one of the main causes of reactivity in dogs, because it's quite insidious. It kind of creeps in there without you realizing it, and before long you now have a reactive dog. And the irony of the situation is once they become reactive, then you can't let them sort of play. Well, you could, it's going to be quite a nerve-wracking experience, but that then just leads to more frustration in the dog, and you just get this really vicious circle of aggravating situation upon aggravating situation, and before long the dog is to the point where they're so reactive you can't actually do anything with them. Number 6 is lack of guidance, and this problem breaks my heart. It really does. I see a lot of reactive dogs that, had they received the right guidance from the beginning, the problem would never have developed in the first place. And the reason this breaks my heart is because nobody causes problems in their dogs on purpose. This problem happens purely because owners don't know how to deal with it. The most important aspect here is to understand that your puppy or your young dog is going to be looking to you for guidance. They need to know from you, how do I deal with this situation? And if you're standing there with a mouthful of teeth, they're going to have to make their own decision, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to make a poor choice. We need to provide guidance to our dogs. We're not going to do the work for them, but we're going to provide them with guidance. We're going to provide them with feedback. When they show us behavior that is socially acceptable, absolutely, we give them the thumbs up. We let them know in no uncertain terms that was a great choice that you made there. When the behavior is not so great, we modify the environment. We say to them, no, we didn't like that. We're not going to do that again. And there's ways of doing this without being ugly to the dog. Like I said, we can modify the environment. We can make small, subtle changes to bring about the behavior we want, and we can make other changes to make sure that the behavior that we don't like just doesn't happen. And that guidance can be something as simple as saying to the dog, good dog, that was a good choice. And then you could seal the deal with a treat. Guidance is not sticking a treat in front of the dog's nose to prevent it from making a decision. A lot of people go wrong with treats in this regard. The treat is there as a stamp of approval. It's hard. I get that. It's hard to know when to use the treat, when not to use the treat. Definitely going to make a video on that at some point in time to hopefully have more clarity on this situation. But the guidance that owners are giving to their dog should be more of an emotional kind of connection that they're having with the dog. It shouldn't be coming out of a treat bag. As soon as you start substituting treats for your approval and your guidance, you kind of remove yourself from a position of importance in the dog's life, and that's a slippery slope. Then number 7, and this should have actually been number 1, is medical issues. If a dog is feeling unwell, if they are in pain, if their senses are impaired in any way, this can obviously make them more likely to be reactive because, again, they're feeling a little bit fearful, they're feeling a little bit anxious. So always bear that in mind. It's surprising how often there's a underlying medical cause for behavior problems that we see in our dogs, and that should always be the first thing that gets looked at, is the actual welfare of the dog. Is everything 100% fine? And if it is, sure, then you can move on to the other potential motivators for this problem. Number 8, we have resource guarding. And again, that's going to be more prevalent in some breeds, obviously the guarding breeds, but it can happen in any breed. And that resource can be food, it can be toys, it can even be the owner. We will often see this in toy breeds that are frequently picked up, and there's nothing wrong with picking a dog up provided it's not causing a problem. And they will become quite possessive of their owner. You know, I'm sure you've all seen the owners holding the little toy dog, and someone comes up to pet it and the dog has a go at them. And what's happening there is 9 times out of 10 the dog's going, this is our little bubble, you need to remove yourself from that bubble, please, thank you. So that resource guarding is something that's fairly easily managed unless the resource is the person. If the resource that the dog is guarding is food or toys, obviously get rid of the food or toys. Understand though that there's probably a learned component to the reactivity by then, so there's quite a bit of unlearning that needs to happen. But a lot of people tend to overlook the importance of resource guarding as a motivator for reactivity. Number 9 is the owner's behavior. I get it. Owning a reactive dog it's terrifying. You're always worried, oh, what if I lose control? What if the other dog takes severe exception to the way my dog is behaving? And it very quickly becomes an anxiety-inducing episode that's really not fun for the owner. But unfortunately, the more tense and the more upset and the more anxious the owner gets, the worse the dog is going to behave. We have a saying in the dog training world that the leash is actually a conduit. It's a conductor of emotion from the owner to the dog, and it's so true. You know, from the dog's perspective, you can imagine they're having a nice walk, everything's fine. The next minute, they just feel all this anxiety coming from their owner. They scan around, they see another dog, and they go, obviously that's the thing that's going to be causing us issues. And it actually trains the dog to become reactive when the owner is like that. There are a bunch of techniques and tactics that you can employ to improve your control over your dog, especially if your dog is of the reactive variety. I'm going to be sharing some of these tips with you. Stick around later on. I'll share the link with you to a video that actually covers some really useful, practical, hands-on techniques that you can use that will improve your control over a reactive or potentially reactive dog. And the last reason, we give this a nice word, we call it idiopathic reactivity, which basically means we don't know. I don't believe there's any such thing as true idiopathic reactivity. There's always going to be some motivating cause for it. It's probably one of the preceding causes that I've gone through, but it's well buried, or it's something that may have happened without the owner's knowledge. So it appears to be idiopathic, but it's not. There is a sound reason for it. I joke around and I say sometimes dogs are reactive because they're a chop. They're just wallies. It's highly unlikely. There's generally always going to be a reason for it, but we put this category there just on the odd chance that it's not fitting into any of the other categories. Identifying your dog's motivations for their reactive behavior is going to be crucial in helping you to address their reactivity and hopefully resolve it. It's not going to be an easy road, that's for sure. Reactivity can be one of the most challenging behavior problems to work with, especially if you are doing it by addressing motivations. Sure, you can just apply punishes and you can suppress the behavior. It's going to pop up somewhere else. But if you are properly addressing the reactive behavior It's going to be a long road, but it should be a steady road. And one of the fundamental aspects of dealing or addressing reactivity in a dog and trying to resolve this issue is to keep them below threshold. The last thing you want to do is in your training to consistently have them going over threshold, because the more they do it, the more they're going to be likely to do it. I want you to imagine your journey in dealing with your reactive dog is you're going up a slope. Okay, it's not like this. It is going to be like that. And if your dog has a reactive episode, it pushes you further down that slope. So it's a situation of 1 step forward, 2 steps back. If the dog is consistently going over threshold and having a reactive response, you're going to end up making less ground, you're going to make more ground going backwards than forwards. So really do your best to keep them below threshold, and understanding their motivations for their reactive behavior should help you a lot in achieving this. In some instances, you either have to expose your dog to triggers, for example, taking them to the vet, or there's a variable outside of your control that puts your dog in that situation where they are exposed to a trigger and a reactive episode is really likely. I've put together a video that's going to help you with some leash techniques, some footwork, some body work that can help you in those situations to mitigate and to try and reduce the reactivity as much as possible, and obviously avoid any kind of injury to you and your dog. Check it out, and hopefully that again is another tool that you can use in your journey to reduce your dog's reactivity. So there you have your main reactivity motivations in dogs. If you have a reactive dog, I hope that's helped you to understand where they're coming from a little bit more. If you don't have a reactive dog, thank your lucky stars, and I think it's important to still pay attention to those motivations to help you avoid unnecessarily contributing to having a reactive dog in the future.